we decided at a certain point we come up with this idea of give some time of free speech to the people that actually join us in this roundtable. Actually, we wanted also the person that we meet today because Daniela Margot works in ISPE. That is actually where teachers learn how to teach. Okay. So the idea was to talk about new pedagogies, new didactics, and technologies, with the idea that actually, I think this is what came out from a lot of presentation. I think that new technologies are not enough. I mean, there is an hype on new technology in some way, on education, and there are also a lot of public programs that say, okay, let's buy 1,000 of robots and put them in the classroom, and then nothing happens. The problem is that the robot by itself is not a solution, I think. And today we heard about many things that are technological, but also are around the technology itself. I'm thinking about what Pierre said today about the scenario, thinking not just the technology, the robot by itself, because the technology may not work as we wish, or also maybe we really don't know if we want. Okay, but the important thing is how we organize the interaction between the children, the technology, and the teacher that actually guides these things. So with this idea, and also with the idea of, okay, we have a lot of technology, but how we can go in the real places and to the children, to the students, okay, like bridging this gap. So we had all this idea. We wanted to talk with some people that actually can try to arrange a discussion on this. So here we have David Cohen, that actually for us, I think it's important because it covers another brick of this conversation, that is maybe the use of technology for children with special needs, okay? And with David Cohen is actually director of the pedopsychiatry exists. Child adolescent psychiatry. I'm mixed with Italians. Here of the hospital, the Pitié-Salpêtrière Medical Hospital. So maybe you want to start with telling us something that you do in your research on this intersection with education, and why you think also, maybe if you think that technology are important, and in which sense.
Okay, I try to make it brief, even if my English is maybe like Italian, I don't think. I work with engineer for now 20 years. So I am a member of a lab of engineer. I'm not an engineer myself, but I have learned with them that you can grasp complexity if you realize that you can learn from each other. So we started to work in the very early beginning on home movies of babies that we later develop autism. That was our starting point. Okay, so it's very fast from medication and very far from robotics. But it was a way to understand what AI can bring to social signal processing, which in psychology was very difficult to do, because usually we do in psychology very micro annotation. It's very time consuming. Otherwise, we have scales that summarize, maybe 1, 2, 3, 10 minutes of interaction. But the summary is not, following the turn taking that you have in a real life interaction. So all these aspects of signal processing was very important to me. Then we started to build the idea that maybe a robot could be an assistant. Because I was in the lab of robotics, so we started to work with robotics years ago. We We did a first project on developmental robotics that had a very elegant impact because we were able to understand something through machine learning that I could not catch when humans were interacting with children with autism, and even when we were looking at the videos. And it was something related to motion, to make it brief, because it was an imitation task, you know. And we repeated the experience with an avatar that was more smooth than the robot, because the robot for imitation, you know, it was very big movements. It was not as smooth as what you can do with avatars and agents. So we did a tightrope walker, and we did the experiment with some refinements. But to make it brief, the assistant robotics, you had this morning a presentation from Pierre Dillenbourg, and you see the video of Thomas, maybe. I mean, Thomas Gargou, he was PhD with me, and Pierre on that project, and we started to work on the idea of the protégé effect with the scenario, with the robot, but we included inside also a serious game, Dynamics, that you can find on Apple Store, as Pierre said this morning. And we combine both effects to have scenarios that could keep the kid involved in the interaction for, I think that in the paper we have 52 sessions. So it's really, and they were 25-minute session. So it's quite a long interaction with the robot. And that's why the paper, we call it, it's not the robot that learned, it is me, because at some point the kid was aware the robot was just here to repeat what he was doing to help him correcting himself. But he was happy even to have understood this illusion, and he was coming, you know, with the robots. And then we started to simplify the scenario with that, with the platform and the feedback we can give to the robots. And so we moved on the area of serious game, and we tried several projects. Some of them are quite well established in some way. Others are very preliminary. For example, a preliminary project, and we don't have the financing to make it more easy. We developed an algorithm to detect emotion in interaction, so we can measure emotion production or facial expression during interaction. And it's a very, very strong algorithm because he won several prizes at specific conferences. It's a Kevin Bailly, another engineer I work with. And we implement this feedback in a serious game, an existing one. But in that serious game, usually it's the therapist that says to the kid, you are performing well, you are in difficulty, you can do it better. No, it's not joy, it's sadness, whatever. But we have the algorithm to give the feedback during the game. And this is important because when you do serious game, you need to understand that the serious game, you have an educative agenda. And many applications have an educative agenda. But it's not exactly the same when you include inside some algorithm that give you, let's say, an extra power in the game. So many games, they have algorithm for severity because it's very easy to do that. I mean, you classify your agenda and you say, okay, you give it according to the response of the kid. So that's the basic AI, very basic. I don't call it AI actually, but anyway, now people are calling everything AI, so we need to adapt. So it's important to see the agenda, what you include in it, but at the end, it's nice also to have a clinical validation. Many experiences are very limited. Some experiences, even if they are developed with autistic experts, with autistic kids, with children with special needs, they don't go to clinical validation because for many companies, it's easier to find their markets in the education field. because in the education field, everybody goes to education. And I have to say, that was a discussion we had with Dynamilis when they built the startup, because as a doctor, I wanted to go until the medical validation for children with dysgraphia, because this is the clinical diagnosis associated with children that has impairment in writing. But, you know, all the business people said, but okay, dysgraphia, it's not really a market, it's better to go in education because all children write at school, and that's true. I can't argue with that, you know. So we decided to make in the education field, but we still have some clinical studies, and maybe some days I will have my clinical validation, even though it's already on the market. On another game, actually, that was not presented today, it's a game on reading. It's more or less the same idea of Dynamilis for writing, but here we work on phonology, on rhythm, on basic functions that you need to master when you want to learn how to read. Here we are finishing a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. So we included 170 kids. So I don't know the result yet. I'm hoping there is something, because otherwise it's a lot of work. Not for nothing, because I believe the game, and maybe sometimes you have negative results that you can at least that makes you learn how to eventually modify, you know, the game. But my point is, if you want to be in the health area, or the mental health area, or the educative area, I think it's important, as Pierre says this morning, to think about the scenarios, but also to think how to implement studies that allows you to have some kind of clinical design, educative validation. Otherwise, it's a lot of work, maybe not for many things. So my advice, it's really to, if you want to go in that field, to try to work with an alter ego, which is not an avatar, nor a robot, but just another professional that will, you know, exchange with you, and with, because I worked a lot with, as engineer, with Mohamed Chetwani, who organized actually the conference, and with Salvo. And usually when we have a very challenging project, we try to have at least one PhD or postdoc in the clinical field, and one PhD or postdoc in the engineering field. And actually this morning you see the duet that was working on the Eurocheck, Jailin and Swazik, and Swazik is the clinician and Jailin is the engineer. And it's the best way and I only regret, and I can say it in the round table, that they did not show you the result that we have, because we have results of the Eurocheck project that were quite interesting, but they decided not to show you because it's on submission in some paper, but whatever. But I know PhD needs to have a nice, you know, journals, or and there are some very boring journals that believe that if you talk in a conference, then the whole world will know that we have found something, which is a bit megalomaniac. But I'm a psychiatrist, so I won't talk about that. So that's my view. But I feel I spoke as if it was a conclusion. So maybe you can give us.
What was the question? I don't know. Actually,
I am an old man, like yeah.
So that, thank you very much, David, for your clinical view. Our goal in this weird round table, almost round table, is to have the point of view from the research, but also from industries, the companies that are working in the area. So you guys already seen these people there in the demos, but now what we want to ask you is like, if you can again present yourself and your company and talk about these challenges that you've been facing. I think I like it very much what David said in general, but also on a specific point about multidisciplinarity. which I think it's one of the key points when you want to achieve success in an application, not only I mean, especially in education, because you have many fields, you have to know where to go. So if you from company could share your experience and briefly tell us the key points of your success, how you managed to go towards this direction in your company, we would really appreciate. I suggest to start right on my side.
Thank you. So I am Abdel, founder of startup called Smarteo, which specializes in developing digital and interdisciplinary 21st century skills for kids aged 5 years and beyond using robots. So you may tell us, but why robots? What robots are 21st century tools? We use robots as a tool. Robots is not the objective of the learning experience. It's very important for me to say that which is important is not the tool in itself. It's the learning experience that we build using the tools that we have. In 2023, we will use, we have the robots, and the robots offer very, very advantages. In particular, they enable the kids to manipulate and to have this relationship with the digital worlds where they are not passive in face of a screen. They will be here to manipulate the object. The object will move, will interact with the human, which is very important. So there is something very important who has said Mr. Cohen, is that interdisciplinarity and the learning context is important. So we will not tell the kids, well, kids, here is a robot and we will code or program the robot. We will talk about subjects such as inventing stories, talking about the smart city, about ecology, about the voyage of Ulysses or any other story, and they will use the robot to tell the story. So when they tell the story, they will build, how do we say in English, maquette? Okay. They will build plateaus. They will build their story. They will tell it. They will discuss all together, and then at the end they will program the robot to tell the story. So when doing this, these kids will learn French language skills, collaboration skills, as well as STEM skills. There is a second very important point, which is really important, is where to find these kids, where to work, and how to measure the effect of what we do. So as a company, we try to work with education. And when we go to schools to try what we do, actually it's not easy because teachers will tell us, okay, I don't have time. I have a curriculum that I am not able to put these interesting things in my curriculum.
I thought that only happened in research, not in industry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm joking that I thought this only happened in research.
It's the same thing in industry as well. And except in private schools. In private schools, they have the money, they have the pressure of the direction to use things. But in public schools, it's based on the will of some particular teachers. Actually, some teachers are very motivated to test new things. But other teachers just are not easy, familiar with robotics, coding, etc. So they will put this aside. So what we say is that we are on education, learning, but kids learn in school. They also learn outside school. So we work very much with extracurricular organizations, mainly in public libraries, ludic centers, and so on, where kids will play with this object, with this learning experience outside of school. Okay, this is the first point. The second point is how will we measure the effect of what we do? And here there is a real problem, actually. One of our problems is that we are not able to put in place a testing, an experimental process to measure precisely what's the impact of what we do. We can measure it qualitatively. We have feedbacks. We have a lot of feedbacks. We analyze the feedbacks, but it's not a quantitative validation. And here I completely agree that we need to work with the researchers to find a way to measure the impact of these activities on the long term. We have many people participating to workshops occasionally, like a 2 hours workshop or many times 2 hours workshop. What's important is to be able to follow the progress of a kid on several months and see if this kind of learning has a long-term impact on the capacities and the skills of these kids.
Maybe
so,
about this is interesting at this point of measuring stuff.
Yeah.
And this maybe just if you can talk about what you are doing, because this thing of measuring, I have the sensation that you are really good on doing this. So maybe you can say something about.
Yeah, thank you. But only men are talking, so I'm going to be short. I'm the CEO of LearnEnjoy, and we are building apps, educative apps for schools. And we are working exclusively with public schools, but it's easier because we are doing apps on tablets. So it's less costing than robots. So, but it's still a big process to integrate public schools. And we take the school curriculum and we divide it into small exercises that are really progressive. And then the kids are going to work on the exercises that the teacher will choose for them. And we will measure their progresses according to the results. So as you say, as you were saying, it's quite basic, but still it's pragmatic. So now we know the levels in every field of the children based on real data, and we can cross it with more qualitative data, because we also give the opportunity to the teachers to fill questionnaires about the psychological development of the children, to give more data, and then we can classify the children into some profiles to give them activities in their progression range. So that's pretty much it. What I can say. And we are building. I try a lot to work with research, but it's not as easy as it would suggest. It's really costly. It's really hard for a company to get the funds to do it. So we managed, though. We all of our apps, except one, has been approved and tested by clinical research. But it has been such an effort, and I completely get that it's not feasible at the beginning. It needs you need to build files, to answer bids, to find collaborations like we could create today. So it's a lot about networking, and it's a long-term work. It took us 5 years to do the first research program, and now we are finishing the second one after 9 years. But we have been awarded by the Haut Conseil pour la Recherche Scientifique, the High Council of Scientific Research and Education, to have created with the University of in east part of France, which is called the University of Lorraine, to have created the best app in education. It's called Appli-nous for kindergarten children, that pushes them into working in autonomy on math and French with an assistant that is giving them feedbacks on their results and guiding them through towards the good answer.
Thank you. Maybe as we are talking about tablets and stuff, maybe you want to explain something about it.
Sure. So I'm CEO of Emoface, and what we do is work on developing emotions, so learning emotions and developing social skills first looking at autism, where basically we chose this because it was like emergency situation. We started in the history of the company. We started from the fact that scientifically we noticed a link between the research I was doing with, let's say, digitalizing emotion and the needs in autism. But mostly we did it because there is a, say, dramatizing situation, not only in France, in many countries, in what happens with finding the right treatment and really finding tools that work, that are efficient, that are scientifically validated, to work on this part that is basically one feature that characterizes autism, which is difficulties in social interaction. And in our case, what we did is that we really started from the terrain, and we worked from the beginning with structures and professionals to test everything that we had. Everything was tested from the smallest prototype, and we really took the input of all professionals. All the prototypes we built them also with autistic adults and children in the manner that we could, for depending on their capabilities. With parents also, because we wanted to make sure that it's a tool that can be adopted. Can be adopted, that means that it has a sense within the schedule, extremely busy schedule of a professional, and also within the life of a parent. We noticed how they work, we noticed what happens at home, and the point was to build something that first can be used, and then build something that works. And the one important part for us in the research was actually the UI UX design. Within autism, it's very important to have an interface that doesn't overstimulate, that is efficient in transferring the learning. And then, of course, in our case, as we work on social emotional skills, the question of evaluation is a very important, a tricky one, because evaluating social skills and emotions is something that's even like the first questions we had for clinicians, like what tools do you use to evaluate? We don't really have anything standardized. Many times we just work with paper and we try to build stuff, and we try to adapt it as much as possible to the kids, because we respect our there's so many different kinds of needs. So yeah, this was a very tough starting point, because we didn't have really any clear tools that we could use to evaluate what we were doing. So that's why we're also looking at this, like what would be a good evaluation tool, and especially how could we integrate it in a company, like a company methodology towards that works throughout the life of an autistic person, in the sense that it works also for diagnosis, for choosing the right therapy, delivering it, and then actually checking how it progresses.
Thank you, super interesting. But you know, I'm like a lot of robots. So here we have someone, yes. Maybe you can tell us something about robots.
Yes, so I'm Lucy. I am head of educational content at Leka. So Leka, probably you saw it, is the little robot, the little white robot, and it works with tablets. And on the tablet, you have an application with the content, the educational content, sorry. So you can find some activities and some curriculum also. And we also have the cards, the magic cards that you have seen that works with the RFID technology. So it's another way to interact with the robot without the tablet. And what can I say from my experience, because I'm not PhD or I don't do research, but I work a lot with a professional from the field. So basically a specialized educator and who tests the robots with children. And what I can say is that, as you said, the robot is just a tool, like it's just another tool in the toolbox of the professional, and so the professional will use it to motivate the child, to engage him in the activity, and so it's really a mediator. And then what's matter is the quality of your educational content that will provide a diversity of content you can do. Sorry for my English. And so it's just it's just to say that yes, the robot, we know that it's just a tool, just another tool, and just we can see that it motivates a lot of children, and a lot of professionals say that there is many content that they will not have done with the children without the robot, because they didn't want to do it, but the robot just motivate them to do so. So that's like how we see it. Is a mediator, is something that push them to learn.
Thank you. I just want to ask the audience if you want to jump in the conversation, please do. Okay, fine.
So I just have actually following up on just what you just said. A quick question is: some of you are also selling robots, like in schools, as I understood from you, especially our conversation. So I was wondering that while yes, there are these positive outcomes that robots have helped to increase the motivation of typical or atypical children, but do you get feedback like from schools or parents or whoever the target stakeholders are, that after a while that initial charm fades out or the tool isn't used anymore? Because that's that is something that we do observe generally.
We don't work with school. We really just work with institutions like ICMI. I don't know if you know. Yes, thank you. Specialized institution. Thank you. So I don't know for school, but yes, probably with some children, they start liking it, you work on it, you work on educational content for a while, and then, yes, of course, the wow effect is not here anymore, but there is many children that create a relationship with the robot, that they like to see it every week, and to have the session with Leka. And that's also our purpose, to develop a large quantity of educational content. So there is a diversity in what we propose. So the children are not used to, and they still get along, if I can say, with the robot. So of course this phenomenon exists. But with many children, they still keep working with the robot with pleasure for a long time. But we would like to make a study, like with someone that make research to really prove that on the long term we have this phenomenon. But I just say with my experience, and
because I think that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just finishing. Like, I think that this feedback would directly form a loop, like a feedback loop to fine-tune the products out there. Because one thing that we always hear in HRI on HCI is that some of the tools the startups failed because they didn't end up really solving a problem that existed. They were really exciting tools, but then the gap or the need wasn't really the one that stakeholders needed, or something like that. So yeah,
I ask a short question that goes into continuity of the previous one, but that takes the situation from the opposite perspective. Even if I can predict the answer, but have you ever observed a phenomenon where the user would develop what is called, at least in the field of motor learning, the guidance hypothesis. The principle of guidance hypothesis is that the user develops a dependency, develops a too strong link to the tool used, and that he or she cannot anymore efficiently perform the task without assistance. Unfortunately, these situations are mostly observed in the field of motor learning in rehabilitation context, with persons that use interactive technologies and differential feedback for post-trauma
cerebral palsy
rehabilitation. They expect naturally to be guided. They expect to receive this artificially created layer in their reality. They expect the augmentation of the reality, and they might develop a sort of defense. So, of course, here we are talking about different kinds of technologies, but still, could we imagine a situation where a kid who uses for 6 months, or I don't know, maybe not on a daily basis, but twice a week or 3 times per week, an application for dysgraphia to help to improve his writing capacities, to develop a sort of dependence?
That's a very good question, and it's very pertinent, I think. But from my experience, I have been here for 3 years, and I have never seen a child or a professional ever said to me that the child was dependent. And yeah, also I think the sessions are like often every week for like 15 to 20 minutes. So I think it's not on a daily basis, so probably to avoid also the dependence that it could probably happen, but I have never seen this yet.
In terms of medical perspective, I think it's not at all the same situation, because here we are talking about robotic systems that are trying to interact regarding motivation, regarding maybe some educational principle that you need to master to improve whatever the task is. But it's not scenarios where the robotic system is doing the task for. And it's not going to happen tomorrow, because as said Pierre this morning, the robotic systems for that kind of task are very limited. It's not the same in re-education, because motor activity in robotics, actually, when you go in big factories, you don't find any more workers. You have robots doing the things, because mechanically they are very effective. We are not exactly at the same level in terms of social interaction.
I can give an example to illustrate my question. It's a paper that I read recently. It was about providing visual feedback by a 3D projector using different color coding to guide the motion of a person post-trauma rehabilitation to help the person to perform a very simple motor task, okay, like moving the hand from this point to that point. And the researcher from Microsoft tested different visualization techniques that would accompany and help the user to move his hand. And they explored through a series of experiments that everything goes very well, that the user is helped by the visual feedback during the feedback, but when the feedback is gone, he performs even worse than without the feedback at the beginning.
I see the example now, but I think that what was missing here was what we call the generalization process that is always required in re-education. For example, I'm not talking about robotics, but just basic language disorder. There are some kids that we use very old techniques all over the world that use movements to correlate the way to use your articulation, you know, because they have problems. But of course, you try to speak with them the right way as well. You are not doing always, it's only to help. but you need to think about the generalizations. I believe in that experiment, maybe because it was a very, fragmented experiment. They just had their protocols, and that's nice that they take into account this kind of, because it's not often that you have the loop that you are describing. So that's nice. But I believe that maybe in stroke, some patient will have difficulty to generalize, but maybe not because of the technique itself, but because the stroke is, you recover smoothly, and sometimes you have a state in which you get better, but not completely well. So I don't know exactly what, but in social work we are describing, we are not at that level of let's say, HRI.
Maybe,
I think we're going to say the same thing, I guess.
Maybe it's about just think about assistive technology and the way that, because let's talk about generalization, how do we bring people to actually go back completely and not need this anymore. There should be one transition phase that should be adaptive. It shouldn't be sudden. In that case, it's normal to have this drop sudden.
Yeah, we call it the l'estompation, l'estompage. In English, it's fadeness. So when you guide a child, especially with autism, for instance, or at the beginning you have to guide him strongly to achieve a task, and little by little reduce the guidance, and then let it alone. And after that, the next step is generalization. So you didn't define what it is. Generalization is to give in another context. So imagine you are working with a robot or with a tablet. Generalization is to make differentiation of contexts with the same task. So if I ask a child to count the tomatoes on the tablet, then the last step is to make him do the same in reality with real tomatoes. So in every competencies we give to work in the tablet with the app, there is always a stage of doing the same in reality to avoid this, because it exists a lot in autism. Autistic children are if they learn that the tomato is this image, then they will stick to it, and they will maybe not recognize the real one. So it's
over learning.
Yeah.
Like I always have this example. For instance, one of the first interactions I had with the professional, trying to check how they work and everything. They said, okay, we try to use social scenarios for a class to learn how to raise the hand when they wanted to say something. And they learned that with visual tools on paper, in which the teacher was dressed in a red sweater. And it worked in real life only when the teacher was dressed in a red sweater. And that's why our point is have as much as visual content, very diverse, with all colors, all morphologies, everything, so that you really gradually go towards that generalization phase.
But I just another question, maybe it's not related to someone specific, so whatever you can. We were talking during the lunchtime about the growth of this research, because I'm accustomed to research, what I mean. And you repeated now that the goal is to, you said the one sentence, I know that the goal is to make technology that can be adopted, isn't it? So right now, this technology, okay, we make projects, we make small, it's ponctuellement, we say in French. It's punctually, we do this project, we do sometimes these things. We are still not in the massification of the use of these technologies. While we have computer everywhere, still and also tablets everywhere, we are not able to enter in the classroom and arrive in massive form. According to your experience, I know that this technology is still not mature, but according to your experience, what are the things that prevent us Yes, but I mean, your face saying a lot of things, but I mean, maybe we can just try to, can I say, discuss around this point, because I think this is also in order also to make an agenda of the research, of the things, the points that we have to solve. Okay, maybe not only the things that breaks. The tablets with all these things that they really like because they're, you know. But I mean, I don't know if there is someone.
What's the question?
Yes, the question. What is missing for a mass adoption of these technologies?
It's meant because I like to be always like why? Because there's many small blockages, there's stuff for technology, but if you really go to why in the medical social structures, the answers are not enough professionals, not enough money for salaries, therefore not enough time, not enough. If the conditions of work were different, then they would really have more time also to be formed to the new technologies and to. It's also a question of time and being open. And then we can really go to look into technology. Yeah, you don't get too political, but this is like where the end of the question is open.
No, because you say, because I would have inverted a few things. I mean, you looked before the money and the time, and then something that Feki said, there are some professors that actually want to do this kind of things, and actually they do it.
Maybe I can give the experience of my department, because I did not say that I have a regular school in my department, so 15 teachers, and I also have psychotherapists working. So I remember 20 years ago when I said to the department, okay, I'm going to open some kind of pipeline with the engineers here. You know, people were looking at me. I had questions such as, but do you think that robotics are going to replace, robots are going to replace clinicians? And the teacher, there was, so you don't need us anymore. It's only machines that are going to, and I can tell you there was a real resistance. So we decided to start for a first approach, because we didn't have anything to propose anyway. So because it was just starting, I said, okay, let's start who wants. And now, because it's now 20 years that we are working with his colleagues, some of them have been, have left the department or the school, and others are coming, but now they know that they will find this kind of environment. So I think that those who comes are interesting, but I can say that now, I don't know how many teachers accept the robots now. Half of them at least.
Well, I mean, before starting the research, not many of them. And when they got to really see what was going on and really what the tools were, yeah, we said half of them were enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, I can give also, because this is really the core of my job, because I have a company with 5 products in education that are quite strong and that have a real interest for children, and we are now in mass adoption phase. So every week I am in seminars throughout all France to show the apps to hundreds of teachers. And what I can see is that there is approximately a third of teachers that are that won't go, but 2/3 that would go. But first they say no, because it's the changing phase is hard, like it's a cognitive bias. But when they see, as you said, when you show them, then they are reassured and they would like to use once they see. So because they would first say no, they won't go themselves. So we need a political thing from the top. At least we need to give them the possibility to see what it is. If not, they won't go. So we need equipment and training first, and then the resources, and that's quite a lot. So the government launched last year a program in 12 we call departments, so 12 areas. It's called the digital educative territories, where there is massive investments for equipment with tablets and computers and training, and some resources have been selected. We have, luckily, and now it works really well because they can choose, they see what it is, they have a lot of videos to inform them what it is, and then they like, and it changes their way of doing. But it's a lot of investment, and if there is not this political incentive, then it doesn't move, because I guess like teachers are kind of spread in their schools, and they are kind of far from innovation world. So if it arrives in their hand, if it's in their hand, then they love it. But the step back is hard. Is hard for them. And this is for schools and for medical special needs institutions. We really struggle, and I think it's more related to lack of humans, lack of possibility to work with. Also, there is less teaching investment. So it's more like trying to help the children just be autonomous. So it's even harder.
May I comment on something that we also had to discuss before together? There is a reluctancy of the professionals in the scholar environment, the teachers, but I guess that there is also reluctancy from parents, right? And I think that education, sensibilization is very important, because as a parent, we also receive sometimes controversial information about how screens might be dangerous, and how use of applications might be harmful for kids. So what I want to say is that we need to train and educate not only the professionals of school environment, but everybody, our entire society, about how to use these tools as tools, tools enhancing learning process.
Yeah, I don't have any surprise.
I have a question, because so you mentioned that the professional might tailor the use of robotics, but I think it's also can go the other way, and I mean it's a bit cliche to say that, but ChatGPT, for example, like I'm just like taking like expectation, but do you know if people right now are putting too much expectation into the product, so expecting like the robot to agility, to have some sort of agility, being able to respond and so on, and so maybe have to like too optimistic projection into the product.
Yes, for me there is a fantasy about the robot, like, and sometimes we have clients that were very happy to receive the robot, and then when they have it, they are a bit disappointed. So also,
but it's also because everything that you find on the internet that, let's say, advertise the robotic field, people don't understand that most of the scenarios are without a voice. So when they discover that there was a guy behind that you never see in the video, that was just, it's quite a disappointment. I mean, ChatGPT, at least, if you ask your answers, it's really, I mean, it gives you something. I mean, it's not I mean, you can discuss what it gives you, but it has some possibility. I think that robotics, I mean, you have even the movie industry has, I mean, gives a representation of robotics that are not reached by what we call robotic here in research. So there is a big gap and disappointment. And actually, you talk about political decision that in schools, but there is quite a story that you must know, that there are 200 robots that have been bought by political decisions that just are in boxes somewhere in schools because nobody knows what to do with them because nobody thought about the scenario. I mean, there was a guy who said, okay, let's put robots in schools. I'm going to go 200. Okay. But now I had an email from a very high position guy at the Ministry of Education telling me, don't you think we can do something with robots? He wants to send 2 or 3 in my lab and my school, that's fine, but 200, I don't. Okay. Anyway, which I won't say that. Otherwise, it's not nice for them. No. But the company is a good seller. The guy, I imagine I said the guy or the girl. I don't know. No.
But to this, it's basically there's also an effort from the people. You can just have a tablet and magically it works.
Yeah, but we all can compete.
Good. Maybe this is a nice conclusion.
For the parents, it's what blocks often the teachers. They are afraid of proposing an innovation that would trigger manifestation because they always have. It's the most difficult part of the teacher job to deal with the parents. So. But I don't really know how to because it's quite easy to convince a parent actually when you talk one by one. It's just every time you need to do it. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of lobbying to just explain the difference between active learning and passive receiving videos, watching the screen. That's so different. And it's really understandable. It just needs to be repeated and repeated again.
Yeah, it feels to me that we can go throughout the night discussing this, but apparently the security guy disagrees. Yeah. I just would like to thank you all very, very much. It was a very nice event. We love to see all this synergy, all this collaboration. We hope that this is not the end, right? We propose you to go to our Slack channel. And you can find yourselves there and exchange more information. We can, the proceedings are by the conference, so we cannot do anything regarding this, but you can go to the website of the conference and check the papers that were presented here. And I think that's it. Hope to see you there in our Slack channel and in the next edition of the workshop, hopefully. Thank you very much again. Thank you.